What you're seeing here are the Jewish peasants in Russia. They worked long hours in dangerous and exhausting conditions, often spending entire days in fields and mines. Out of work, anti Semitism grew rampant due to the propaganda of the Tsar and the Church, to the point that a Jewish person would fear for their lives in their own home. Let me show you this. It's a record of all reported pogroms that have been committed throughout the span of 3 years. 47 Jews killed, 424 wounded. 11 Jews killed, 212 wounded. And over 800 people killed. Clearly, if you were Jewish, Russia was not the place to be. You had to leave. Although Canada was a country filled with immigrants, there are still multiple challenges that one had to overcome to become fully settled into this country. Getting to Canada. Establishing a stable income. Being able to afford housing. And later, getting through the Great Depression. The voyage to Canada was not an easy one. The Continuous Journey Act would mean that immigrants would have to not stop a single time on their trip to Canada, which would mean that there would be extreme shortages in nutritional food as well as disease-ridden passengers. And even after all that, you could still be turned away at the port if you didn't pass a medical exam due to the Immigration Act of 1910, which states that medical officers appointed under this act shall make a physical and mental examination of all immigrants. During the turn of the century, Canada was a thriving country, going through rapid industrialization, economic growth, and a greater cultural shift for entertainment. The country shows off the wonders of modern technology and its ideals. This also meant that there would be no shortage of jobs. Factory workers and farmers were both high in demand.
The view of the population was very, very mixed. It depended on who you were looking at. Employers, first of all, had their own view of immigrants. They wanted them because they wanted cheap labor. And employers wanted often particular kinds of labor, so long as they could pay them a low wage. And that's why employers generally encouraged immigration. They wanted lots more workers. Governments generally complied. They wanted lots of immigrants because they also wanted lots more workers. You know, there was a simple calculation here. If you were going to have a growing, prosperous, modern nation, you had to have lots of people. And, you know, the natural population growth through the birth of, you know, the birth rates in the domestic, the already settled population wasn't enough. You had to have immigrants to increase the population.
However, just because the government and the employers wanted immigrants, that doesn't always mean that they were welcomed by the population.
The problems arise because a lot of other people, and particularly people who already lived here, didn't like certain kinds of immigrants, especially in certain places, like in British Columbia. A lot of people did not like Asian immigrants. They didn't like Chinese immigrants particularly. Why? Because they saw them as competitors for jobs. If you're an English origin worker, a Scottish origin worker, or, you know, a worker that's come from Ontario, and you see all these Chinese people coming, they become convenient scapegoats. You think, oh my goodness, those people are driving wages down. Those people are likely to take my job. Most of that wasn't true, by the way, but this fear arose, fear of immigrants. Immigrants were experienced open racism. For instance, and the federal government got involved here too. In the prairies, the preference of politicians especially was for European and especially white immigrants, right? There were lots of things written in the early 1900s about the so-called immigrant problem. Often immigrants were, especially if they came from elsewhere than the British Isles, they were often referred to as aliens. You know, they were an alien species. Sometimes they were even enemy aliens, especially in the First World War. And the Russians would have come under that heading, Russian immigrants. Well, they were okay, some of them, if they were prepared to farm. But a lot of them were highly suspect. Suspected because some people thought that they had really suspicious political views. But of course, that was particularly true after 1917, after the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Before then, very few Canadians had heard of Bolsheviks, but nevertheless, the Russians were suspected, many of them, of being radical or revolutionary.
The Great Depression was detrimental to the population, causing massive amounts of unemployment throughout the entire country. However, its effects on immigrants were a lot harder, as they did not have a well-established support structure through family farms and savings. This meant that to be able to get food, to survive, people would have to travel far to look for work, often ending up in completely different provinces to the ones that they used to live in. The prairies was a very appealing destination for immigrants in particular, as land was cheap and farming provided food.
They have a system of granting land to immigrants. It's not completely free, but it's very, very low cost, and the immigrants are given sections or quarter sections of land on the condition that they develop the land, that they work it, and after so many years, if they prove that they worked the land, then they are granted that land as their own property. This is occurring under the Dominion Lands Act.
And because of these factors, the prairie saw a huge jump in population throughout the Great Depression, including the population of our Jewish immigrants. From systemic discrimination to economic collapse, the journey of an immigrant to Canada is one filled with many obstacles, with only a few of them covered in this video. Those that made it past them have accomplished truly impressive feats.